Today I want to talk about the DCAU, or the DC Animated Universe. If this is your first time on this channel, or you don't know much about comic books, the DCAU is a group of connected cartoons from 1992 to 2006 that are all part of the same universe where characters can and do cross over from one show to another. Then you had the Teen Titans animated series from 2003 to 2006, and there was quite a bit of debate on if it was part of the DCAU. Some people, like Ted and James from one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Watchtower Database, say that the Teen Titans is not part of the DCAU, but I respectfully disagree. I believe that the Teen Titans series takes place sometime in between the flashbacks of the Batman the Animated Series episode Robin's Reckoning and the present day of Batman the Animated Series. We can almost be certain that the Robin in Teen Titans is Dick Grayson and not Tim Drake from the new Batman Adventures. Yes, in an episode of Static Shock, Batman tells Static that Tim Drake is off with the Titans, but that's presumably a later version of the Titans and not the one from the animated series. The Robin in Teen Titans has the same costume as Dick Grayson from Batman the Animated Series and not Tim's costume. Not to mention, Tim's personality is entirely different from the Robin in Teen Titans. Sure, Robin in Teen Titans doesn't exactly act like Dick does in Batman the Animated Series, but I have a theory on that. Dick is probably 15 or 16 years old in Teen Titans, while he's at least old enough to be in college in Batman the Animated Series. In Teen Titans, he's at least old enough to be driving a motorcycle. Maybe the rules of the road are different in Jump City, or maybe Batman feels comfortable letting Dick borrow a motorcycle and driving it by himself at that age. Who knows? In any case, I imagine Dick had some heated argument with Batman resulting in a "you're not my father" scream, and Dick leaving to fly solo. Batman decided to let him have his space, as pushing him to stay around the cave might only further the schism that they were having. But Batman is probably keeping a close eye on him during the events of the series. And then eventually, sometime shortly after the series ends, things have cooled off a little, and Dick goes back to Batman, and they are willing to work together again for a little while. This would fix a huge problem that I have with the DCAU and Dick and Bruce's relationship in the DCAU. In the new Batman Adventures and Batman Beyond, it's hinted that Dick and Bruce just could not get along, and this is what eventually drove them to go their separate ways. But in every Robin appearance in Batman the Animated Series, with the exception of Robin's Reckoning, we don't even see one disagreement between the two. But if we agree to place Teen Titans a few years before Batman the Animated Series, then that would provide a huge moment of dissension between Batman and Robin that could have eventually fueled the fire that resulted in Dick Grayson leaving Gotham permanently. So chronologically, I placed this series before every other DCAU series, and I think it fits just fine. But some people like to mention a few things as to why or how this series does not fit in the DCAU, and I think I can address most of those. The Gordanians show up in both Justice League and Teen Titans. Different character designs in both shows, sure, but we see different character designs of Batman, Joker, Scarecrow, Catwoman, Penguin, etc. in the DCAU, and nobody bats, pun intended, an eye. And hey, if the different designs really bug you, maybe we've got a Star Trek Enterprise thing going on here where the Gordanians of the 1980s are suffering from the augment virus, and they look different than the Gordanians we see in Justice League in the early 2000s. Probably not, but anything's possible, I guess. Also, Bruce Timm isn't involved in Teen Titans. True, but Bruce Timm isn't involved with Mystery of the Batwoman either, and nobody has a problem considering it canon in the DCAU. Where's Aqualad? We see Aqualad in Teen Titans about the same age as Robin, and we see Aquaman in Superman the Animated Series around the time when Dick is already Nightwing, and Bruce is now working with Tim Drake, and later again in the Justice League cartoons. But no sign of Aqualad. And they're both from Atlantis, so if Teen Titans does take place in the DCAU, then they would probably have been affiliated with each other. My only thought is, by the time you get to Justice League Unlimited, Dick is no longer working with Batman, Speedy is seemingly not on great terms with Green Arrow, so maybe Aqualad and Aquaman also had some kind of split. Knowing Aquaman's kinda abrasive personality in the DCAU, it would not surprise me. Also, Aquaman doesn't strike me as the type to go into great details about his personal life with these surface dwellers, so he wouldn't go talking about his old partner who he doesn't talk with much anymore. And speaking of sidekicks, we have Speedy, who, if anything, only proves that these shows do take place in the same universe. Speedy shows up a handful of times in Teen Titans, and once in Justice League Unlimited, in the episode Patriot Act. In Patriot Act, he has the exact same character model as he had in Teen Titans, and is even voiced by the same voice actor, Mike Irwin. People who like to dispute the Teen Titans DCAU connection often like to overlook this one, but I don't really see how you can. And speaking of sidekicks again, let's talk about a possible connection that is a little screwy and hard to place. Wally West. In Justice League, we have the Flash, who we find out in the 3-part episode Star-Crossed is Wally West. In Justice League Unlimited, we see in the Flash Museum that there is a Kid Flash costume. So at one time, Kid Flash existed in this universe.
When there's trouble, you know who to call. Teen Titans. From their tower, they can see it all. Teen Titans. When there's evil on the attack, you can rest knowing they've got your back. 'Cause when the world needs heroes on
In the Teen Titans cartoon, we have a Kid Flash, and in the episode Lightspeed, he even says, "I work alone now," implying that he did work with someone, presumably an adult Flash, at one time. This makes sense because if you do get super speed powers, why would you call yourself Kid Flash unless there is an adult Flash for you to be a kid version of, if that makes sense. Now, much like how Speedy is voiced by the same voice actor in both shows, Kid Flash and Flash are both voiced by Michael Rosenbaum. So while the Teen Titans cartoon never did go into non-superhero civilian identities in the show, leaving us with some guesswork to do on the identities of Robin and Kid Flash, I think it's safe to assume that the intent was that Kid Flash was indeed Wally West in the Teen Titans cartoon, especially when you look at interviews outside of the series, such as this one with showrunner Glenn Murakami. So if we assume that Kid Flash in Teen Titans is indeed the Flash in Justice League, that leaves us with a few questions. Where's Barry Allen? We don't see any adult superheroes in the Teen Titans cartoon, but I am assuming Barry Allen is still alive at the time Kid Flash tells Jinx that he works alone. But while we don't have any references to Barry in Justice League, I can only assume that Barry died saving the universe, and Wally took over the mantle of the Flash, much in the same way that he did in the comics when Barry died there. And I'm going to assume Wally took over for Barry shortly before the Superman the Animated Series episode Speed Demons. He seems even cockier in that episode than he does later on in Justice League, so maybe he's very new at being the Flash and not just the kid sidekick. Also, this works pretty well with how Flash acted in the Justice League cartoon. He was the most immature of the founding members, and if he was Kid Flash in Teen Titans, then that means he's about Nightwing's age in Justice League, and is thus almost certainly the youngest of the founding members of the League. So far so good, right? Well, there's a problem. In the two-part Justice League episode The Brave and the Bold, we see a brief version of Flash's origin, where he is an adult standing in front of a rack of chemicals and he gets struck by lightning. You see the problem? If Wally from Justice League had his powers since he was a teenager in the Teen Titans series, then how is he getting his powers as an adult in this vision from the two-part Brave and the Bold episode? Well, one, it could be a dream and therefore full of unreliable information. Either that, or here's my favorite explanation, that's not Wally that we see getting struck by lightning in that vision. That's Barry. And Wally is actually remembering seeing this happen. So he's seeing this happen from the same POV shot that the audience is seeing it happen from. He even possibly got his powers in the same time that Barry did from this same strike of lightning, which is a little different than in the comics, but that's fine. The DCAU does tweak things here and there all the time. And before you say, but Barry has blonde hair, well, sometimes he doesn't. What else? What else? Oh, Dr. Light. There's a Caucasian male Dr. Light who is a bad guy in the Teen Titans cartoon, and in Justice League Unlimited, there's a female Asian Dr. Light. What gives? I don't see that this one really needs much of an explanation. There wasn't any connection between these two characters in the comics, and I don't think there has to be one in the DCAU. Dr. Light the First is a bad guy who fought teenagers in the late 1980s, and Dr. Light the Second is a separate individual who fights bad guys in the early 2000s. Then there's the Season 2 premiere episode of Teen Titans, How Long Is Forever, where Starfire accidentally travels 20 years in the future and meets an adult Robin, now calling himself Nightwing. Again, different design from what he looks like in the new Batman Adventures, but not drastically different, and like I said, different character designs in the same universe, so this isn't a deal breaker. But what about the timeline? If Robin is, say, 15 at the youngest in Teen Titans, and then Starfire travels 20 years in the future, that would make him 35 in this future. Okay, sure, I buy that he's 35 here, but does that line up with the rest of the DCAU? Well, this timeline stuff is really the forte of people like Matthew Washburn at the Watchtower database, and so I hope those guys don't mind, but I'm going to be borrowing some of their math real quick here. Supergirl is 16 when she's introduced in the late 90s in Superman the Animated Series, and she's 21 by the time she's part of the League in Justice League Unlimited, which means that even though the Justice League Unlimited series ended in 2006, the show is actually set a few years earlier. And we know Nightwing is still active circa Justice League Unlimited, thanks to this blink and you miss it cameo from the episode Grudge Match. So now all we have to do is assume that he keeps going as Nightwing for another 5 years or so to line up with this future scene in the Teen Titans. And while this future scene in the Season 2 premiere of Teen Titans seems to be so dark because Starfire left the team, it's possible Nightwing is a little more grim and gritty in this future because of events that we see in flashback form in the film Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. So huge spoilers for Return of the Joker, but by the time Tim Drake is kidnapped and experimented on by Joker and Harley Quinn, it seems Nightwing has already left the Bat family for good. At the very least, he's not helping Batman or Batgirl search for Tim in the flashback scenes. Or maybe he is searching, but he is just not with them when they find the exploding Jack-in-the-Box on the roof. But then why wouldn't they contact him when they go to Arkham? So more likely scenario is that Nightwing has once again severed ties with the Bat family. So can we reconcile that with Nightwing still an active crime fighter in Jump City in approximately 2007 or so? Once again, stealing some math from the Watchtower database, they say that Tim Drake was 13 when he joined Batman, at the same time that Supergirl was 16. Not sure if those dates line up exactly, but it's close enough for the purposes of this video. So then when Supergirl is 21 in Justice League Unlimited, Tim Drake is 17. And while we don't have an exact date for when Harley Quinn and Joker kidnapped Tim, we have to assume that he was still kinda young, right? He wasn't in his mid-20s or anything like that. He still looks like a kid in these flashbacks, but that doesn't mean anything. I've seen 18-year-olds who look like they're 12, so maybe Tim was kidnapped when he was 18, and he still looked like he did when he first met up with Batman. So anyway, if Tim was kidnapped when he was 18, and again, we don't know when he was kidnapped, we're just using that as a possible date, then that would be the year after the conclusion of Justice League Unlimited, leaving us with a few years to spare until Starfire jumps to the future in Teen Titans. And I will say that this episode is almost certainly a possible future, with a big reason everything and everyone seems so glum is because of Starfire's absence. But again, it's good to see if the math lines up. So I think it's possible, nay probable, that Dick has already left Batman and Barbara by this point, for reasons that are explained in comic book form if you're interested. But he somehow found out about what happened to Tim, who he still probably thought of as a little brother, and so when Starfire comes back, he's kind of gloomy because of that. So this video is already rambly enough, but we still have to briefly talk about the Titans that are mentioned in the Static Shock episode Hard as Nails. All we really get is that Robin, Tim Drake that is with the Titans, and in another episode, Romeo in the Mix, Bernie Rast, Little Romeo's agent, mentions the Teen Titans, and specifically mentions the green one, presumably Beast Boy, or I guess Miss Martian, but that opens up an even bigger can of worms than what we already have here, so let's just go with Beast Boy. But by this point in the timeline, this is something like 12 years after the events of the Teen Titans series. So this is just my opinion, but I think the original group of Titans, they all went their separate ways, but remained friends. Sort of like when kids meet each other at summer camp and keep in touch when they all go back home. So when they're all in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe they are trying a big brother, big sister thing with the younger heroes of the late 90s, early 2000s. Kind of like the Jeff Johns, Mike McKone Teen Titans run of the early 2000s, where veteran Titans are trying to mentor a younger group of teen heroes. So if that's what's going on, then Beast Boy, by now probably a Beast Man, is probably the leader of a kids clubhouse for younger heroes like Tim Drake and one day Static to come and hang out. I don't see any reason why this can't be true. If you say we never saw any evidence of this in Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, well, Earth is a big place, and there's a lot of stuff that we never saw evidence of at first that was later made canonical, like Spy Smasher doing spy stuff in World War II. So maybe the Titans are keeping it lower profile. Maybe instead of them actively fighting crime, they're more of a superhero academy, learning to control what they've got before they graduate and go do some serious superheroing. I can dig that. So my final point here is something that James Strucker brought up on the Watchtower Database YouTube channel. Hey, you guys should check them out, which if you know who I am, then you most definitely know who they are. He brought up the very good point that if the Teen Titans features a younger Dick Grayson long before the events of Justice League, then when Superman is giving the pitch for the gathered heroes to work together as a sort of Justice League, then why wouldn't Batman say, yeah, my kid's sidekick did this once over 10 years ago? Well, going back to Beastman running the Titans as a sort of kid superhero clubhouse, maybe that's what the original Titans thought of their group as. Not a serious superhero team, but just a fun club for a group of friends to hang out at. When you look at all the video games and general horsing around that they did in that series, it seems like that was their intended goal, and all of the crime fighting was just stuff that they did because it needed to be done, but not because it was their primary goal, which is what Superman is suggesting in Justice League Secret Origins. So Flash and Batman don't bring up the Titans of yesteryear because it's not the same thing. Group of kids hanging out versus a serious job commitment. So none of this is perfect, but even if you remove Teen Titans from the timeline, there's still inconsistencies across the board, and that's okay. It's fun for people like me to pick these things apart and analyze them. So what do you guys think? Have I convinced you? No? Let me know in the comments below, and in the meantime, I'll see you guys later on. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.